The power of an individual. There were missions where we were supporting troops under fire that were in a very difficult situation. You had a JTAC commander that's coordinating multiple air assets, ground assets to try to get his or her troops back home safely. And you can see, look at what an individual does, the decisions they make, the creativity they bring to bear, like actually makes a difference.
Welcome to Combat Story. I'm Ryan Puget, and I served Warzone tours as an Army attack helicopter pilot and CIA officer over a 15-year career. I'm fascinated by the experiences of the elite in combat. On this show, I interview some of the best to understand what combat felt like on their front lines. This is Combat Story. Today we have a unique combat story with F-16 fighter pilot and co-founder of the Defense Innovation Unit Experimental, DIUx, Raj Shah. Raj was handpicked to stand up an organization that would strengthen our armed forces through contractual and cultural bridges between Silicon Valley and the Pentagon, to include accelerating the contracting process and getting the newest tech from Silicon Valley into the hands of the warfighter faster. Raj is one of these guys who seems to have more time in a day than the rest of us. He's a managing partner at Shield Capital, a venture capital firm focused on technologies at the nexus of the commercial and defense markets. He's chairman of Resilience Insurance. He was CEO of Morta Security, which was acquired by Palo Alto Networks, and he reported directly to the Secretary of Defense while running DIUx for 2 years. He attended Princeton and got an MBA from Wharton at UPenn. He and Christopher Kirchhoff recently published Unit X, How the Pentagon and Silicon Valley are Transforming the Future of War, which takes you inside AI labs, drone workshops, and battle command centers to include Ukraine's front line for a fascinating picture of what it takes to stay dominant in a fast-changing and often precarious geopolitical landscape. With that, please enjoy this short but interesting episode with Raj Shah. Raj, thanks so much for taking the time to share your story with us today.
Ryan, it's good to be here with you.
So we've got this interesting book. It's called Unit X. Subtitle is How the Pentagon and Silicon Valley are Transforming the Future of War, written with Christopher Kirchhoff, I know. So one of the things, though, I wanted to talk about before we dig into your story was what's going on now in Ukraine and Israel in terms of the future of war.
Absolutely, Ryan. I mean, it is a unique glimpse into the future, right? I mean, there's this term of revolution of military affairs that has gone in and out of vogue over the years, but you see these tectonic shifts every few generations. You saw it, if you think historically, the advent of the Gatling gun, and how in the Boer War, 50 British troops were able to stave off attacks of thousands and foretold the end of the cavalry. Then in the interwar period, the advent of the aircraft carrier, how we went from battleships to aircraft carrier, and in fact, the Navy admiral was Admiral Moffett, where DIU was headquartered, was the visionary behind that, along with on the the Air Force side, Billy Mitchell. And I think what we're seeing now in Ukraine and Israel is that next change. Just recently, there was public press that the Ukrainians and us have pulled back our main battle tank, the Abrams M1A1 tank, from the front lines of Ukraine because they were being destroyed or disabled by very cheap Russian drones. And so when the most advanced, armored vehicles can't survive the battlefield of today, change is happening, right? And I think it's incumbent on the U.S. and its allies to really understand that and get ahead of it and help again deter conflict. So I think we're seeing this real time in front of us, and others are learning too. So when Hamas went into Israel on the 7th of October, they used drones to take out the power grid by attacking the generators and the substations to enable them to come over the line. So we can't put our heads in the sand. This is coming here today. Yet our system of training and equipping is really built for a different era. And so the real challenges are not just technology, but the bureaucracy to overcome it.
How much faster do you feel the technology is changing now compared to maybe 10, 15 years ago, as we were iterating in these war zones that you and I both fought in? Is it changing faster today than it was then, or does it just feel that way with AI?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the inextricable trend in technology is that change is always inevitable, but it's happening at an accelerating pace, right? Like if you think about AI, if you bring up generative AI, 2 years ago, OpenAI released ChatGPT 3.5 and now 4, and they've gone from a research outfit to one of the most valuable businesses in the world in less than 6 months, right? The curve of adoption is like nothing we've seen before. It's faster than Google. It's faster than Salesforce. It's faster than all these other Microsoft, all these iconic businesses. So the change is here. It's getting faster. And I think when we think about it from a national security mindset, we've moved away from a world of, I've got the best exquisite asset. I have some fancy stealth paint, and I'm going to protect it because it's going to give me advantage for decades. To a world where, because of this change is so rapid, the entity that's able to understand, incorporate, and operationalize this technology faster is the one that will prevail. So it's a very different mindset, and we can talk more about it. Cost then becomes a much larger player than the way you thought about the Cold War and the exquisite systems we won against the USSR. So it's happening, and it's happening in a way that everyone can see it.
Yeah. So for your background, obviously F-16 pilot in the past and today, you still fly. Shield Capital, DIU, entrepreneur, VC. Like when somebody comes up to you and they say, "Hey, Raj, what do you do?" What is your response to them?
Well, they all tie together. I mean, I think, what do I do? I think, I like to think I'm at this intersection of national security and commercial technology building and startups. And I've had the good fortune of sitting on a lot of different sides of that aisle. My primary job now is to sit on the investment side, where I'm investing and supporting and helping young entrepreneurs. And I know how hard it is. I've been in the entrepreneurial seat for 2 companies, and then was in the government side for 2 years at DIU as a buyer, as a procurer of this type of technology. And of course, I started my career very fortunate to get to serve in uniform and be the ultimate end user after the long chain of acquisition comes through.
And so before we dig any deeper into DIU and this work on the tech side, I do want to get into just a bit of your background. Like, why did you end up joining to begin with? And it's through is it through the Air Force regular active duty, Raj, or do you go Air National Guard right out of the gates?
I joined the Air National Guard right out of undergraduate. In fact, I joined while I was still in college and went to the Guards version of officer training school at the time as soon as I graduated. I think for me, there was 2 primary reasons why I joined. My family is of immigrants. My parents immigrated from India, from a very small town in the early 70s. And this country was phenomenal. Me and my sisters got to go to amazing universities. We really did live the American dream, and it's a very unique world where it is a meritocracy, right? Depending on how hard you work and your resourcefulness, you really can do well. And so I thought there was something special, and so I wanted to serve, and I wanted to serve in a physical role. And then, like all little kids, I loved airplanes, and never kind of got those off the mind. And I was fortunate then to get my pilot's license as an undergrad. And so the Air Force told me, and the Air Guard told me I could serve and fly airplanes and jets. And so I said, "Great, sign me up." So I signed up pre 9/11 and was just very fortunate to serve with some really amazing individuals and of course get to deploy and use the training.
Jeez,
like you did.
Did you have military history in the family, even from India?
No, none. My family are all traders or engineers or doctors, and so no, I have zero military history in the family, before or after.
What was the discussion like, if at all, with your folks?
It was a challenge. I think, my dad was very supportive. We spent a lot of dinner table conversations around policy and history, and so he understood why. I think my mom's not the biggest fan of small planes, particularly not ones that have weapons attached to them. Yeah, so I think over time, they became very supportive, right? Because what after I signed on, gone to training, we had the 9/11 attacks, the deployment, and so there was just a real mind shift, I think, in the U.S. too of troops, and so they're very proud at that point. But candidly, I think my mom's biggest concern was like, who's going to marry you as a military pilot?
She obviously hasn't seen Top Gun. A lot of people are going to want to marry you, right? That's the idea. It's what the flight suit's for. Oh, wow. So, and if I heard you correctly, did you end up signing up before 9/11, Raj?
That's right. I did. Yep.
And it was a different time, right? I mean, the decision to do that, I'm sure you had other options, especially coming out of the Ivy League, right? Like you could have done many things. Really, how hard was the decision to make at that point?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I had obviously a lot of friends that were going into Wall Street or consulting, and had a lucrative financial career. It's interesting. One of my professors at Princeton was a great national security leader. Was actually the former CEO of Lockheed Martin, and has just been a great mentor. A guy named Norm Augustine, and he said, "Look, in the short run, you're right. These other individuals will do better than you financially, but he's like, there's something special about getting the opportunity to serve your nation and to do what you love, and it'll all work out for the best in the end." And so he was actually very helpful and instrumental in helping me make that decision. And in hindsight, it's hard to imagine this. You make those decisions as a kid, but I guess being part of something bigger than yourself, something that's really challenging, and working again with amazing individuals is something that is so rare that if you get that opportunity, it's hard to turn down.
Was that a discussion that you sought out with him? This idea of like, hey, I could go to Wall Street or consulting, or I could go do this. Was that your initiative?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was I took his course, and we had he'd become a mentor, and so I sat with him and said, "These are my choices. What do you think?" Again, this was pre 9/11.
Yeah,
and he had the foresight to say, "Look, it's an amazing experience to get to go and to serve, and particularly get to serve in aviation." Interestingly, I for a host of reasons had a delayed a flight school, so I was actually in Manhattan. I was working as a consultant on 9/11. So I was there, and I started flight school in December 2001. So I got to know that what we were going to go and train was really important.
So you saw the smoke that day, huh? I mean,
oh, absolutely. Yeah, I lived in the city. I mean, just, the avenues are all full of people heading northbound, covered in ash. 3 days later, the wind shifted from a southerly direction, and you could smell the smoke and the burn and the stench from the buildings. It was a very somber time.
wow. Did flight school take on a different meaning as a result? Like, I'm sure at one point it was, hey, I'll learn to fly. I'll go do these rotations, and now we're probably going downrange soon.
Yeah. Again, it took a very serious note, and we knew what we were learning, and we had to be as good as we could. Was vital.
How are you accepted as a National Guard pilot during training with some of the active duty guys and gals?
Yeah, I mean, I think for some of the active duty guys, they didn't learn about the Guard until they met us in the process, and so I'm just a huge fan of the Guard, having now been in the Guard for 25 years, and so they were surprised at the flexibility it affords individuals, the ability to go back and forth from full time to part time. I think is really an amazing thing. But my view on flight school and the military is it was the world's greatest meritocracy. At the end of the day, no one cared who you were, where you came from, color, race, sex. It was how good are you? Because you want, as you know, as an aviator, you want the people flying next to you to be as good as they can be, because you literally are carrying each other's lives in your hands.
So if we kind of look at some of the time that you spent in the cockpit, Raj, I'm trying to balance this with what you end up doing during and afterwards, especially with the Defense Innovation Unit. I know from being a pilot downrange, like there were certain things that they would bolt onto our aircraft periodically because it's like the new comms equipment, the new weapon system, avionics, whatever. And sometimes it just didn't work correctly or as advertised, but we were kind of the guinea pigs. I'm wondering if there were times when you were flying that helped influence like the sense of urgency or desire on your end to really bring better systems or capabilities to the warfighter. And I'm wondering if there are any moments that come to mind for you with that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll note the one that we actually, the vignette we actually start the book in, which was on my first deployment there, right? The F-16 was an amazing airplane, very, very capable. But, had of course had a GPS navigation system.
What year
but
is
did
this?
not have this was 2006.
Okay.
2006 in Iraq, but didn't have a high fidelity, moving map system where you could easily look down and see which side of the border you on, right? We had approximations only. And we spent a lot of time supporting ground troops on the border, right? On the Iranian border in particular. And, there was always a fear if you went too far to Iran, God forbid the commanding general found out and sent you home, and it would be the end of your deployment, or even worse, maybe you set off some international incident. And but I remember that same year, I could download maps onto a compact iPad, which is basically the predecessor to the iPad. There's some commercial civilian aviation navigation software. It was like $100, and you can look at exactly where you were. And for me, it was really crystallized the difference in the speed of software advancement that the system we had in the military versus how the private sector was moving forward. And so it was a very stark example of where we were. And of course, we're single seat pilots, and so a lot of guys would just put it on their leg and fly with it.
And is it the idea that you had to resort to this yourself that kind of, that's why it's a vignette in this book, I would assume?
Yes. So when you had to resort to it was yourself, and that's been a history of that. I mean, I always say that the U.S. military doesn't have an innovation problem. It has an innovation adoption problem, right? And that was actually coined by Bob Work, who was the Deputy Secretary of Defense at the time. But you go to the front lines and you'll find the most innovative people in the world. Ground, air, sea, land, whatever. They will do as good of a job as they can with the equipment that they were given, and they'll find workarounds for all kinds of things. I know you probably have countless stories as I do. But I think what it showed was, hey, software in and of itself is a force multiplier, and software is not something that you build one and sustain. You can't think about software as you do building a fighter jet or an aircraft carrier. It's very different, and it's a different skill set. And the fact that these two worlds were going so far, we basically had two different procurement systems, right? You have the way that the DoD buys things, and you have the way the commercial world, the rest of the world, designed, built, and bought things. And the separation of these two worlds would not enable us, the U.S., to continue to have the best fighting force. So it was a real eye opener to just have a stark understanding of that and living it, and so it played a big role, I think, in thinking about speed and the opportunity to go and solve that. 10 years later, when I was afforded the chance to go do DIU.
There's typically two areas of your time deployed that I just like to touch on. One is the very first time you find yourself outside the wire, like flying for real in combat, weapons loadout. Do you remember that time, even if it was a benign mission or crazy? Do you remember that first one?
Of course, I think everybody remembers their first time they got to go out of the wire, even if it was a benign mission, which it was. It's the culmination of all the work that you've done, the training, and I think there's two thoughts. One is like, please God, don't let me screw this up, right? Like you want to do things right, and then there's always some nervousness. What I found though is that as soon as I actually got into the jet, strapped in, your training began to kick in, and your nervousness goes away, and then you were just out singularly focused and executing. And I think I look, wars are terrible, but I look fondly at that time of knowing that what you were going to do that day mattered, and you had agency and responsibility, and you're doing it again with amazing individuals. So I cherish those times.
And then the next one after that, kind of like your first time, first foray, the next is often like one of the tougher moments. But I think for you, I'd just be curious, what's one of the operations or missions or flights where you learned the most during that flight? You seem to be somebody who just really values that learning and iterative approach. And I just wonder what was that flight for you where you felt like maybe it was a really tough flight, but you learned from it?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was probably a couple of instances of that. I think, let me think more broadly of learning. I mean, I think unfortunately in combat you see sort of the best of humanity and the worst of humanity, oftentimes in the same day. I think for me the biggest lesson I learned was the power of an individual. Right. So, there were missions where we were supporting troops under fire that were in a very difficult situation. You had a JTAC commander that's coordinating multiple air assets, ground assets to try to get his or her troops back home safely. And you could see, look, at what an individual does, the decisions they make, the creativity they bring to bear, like actually makes a difference. That you think about the Pentagon as this 3 million person Borg, and it is. But there are many instances where like a single individual mattered, and there are JTACs who were so proficient in what they did that more troops are back home alive and less civilians are dead because of what they did.
They're actually been very surprised in doing this podcast for 3 years. They're a very insular group, very quiet professionals. They don't talk a lot about their accolades, which has surprised me. And having been a pilot, as you know, they are wizards with what they can do in bringing force to the battlefield. So it is pretty remarkable what those JTACs do. So I want to ask, with the Defense Innovation Unit, most people have heard of DARPA. What is the difference between these? How would you advise people think about that as they look at your book?
Sure. DARPA, which has been around for a few decades, mission is to prevent and or create strategic surprise, right? Like, what are the amazing technologies and inventions 10 years from now, 20 years from now that need to be built? And they have some amazing program managers that go and execute that. I think DIU. You have to think back about the history and like why it was created. In 2001, Ash Carter, while he was at Harvard at the time, wrote this seminal paper about how commercial technology will play a major role in the battlefield of the future, where robotics, which is essentially AI, and cyber and electronic warfare, is going to matter. And those advances are happening in commercial companies focused on commercial markets. Amazing, he wrote in 2001. Fast forward 15 years, he is now Secretary of Defense, and he puts that vision together and launches DIUx at the time. So really the mission of it was and continues to be how do you harness commercial companies, commercial innovation, processes, and approach to enhance military effectiveness? And so it's not just procuring things, but understanding how do you integrate these types of technologies? How do you just bring a totally different mindset when you think about low-cost hardware or software to the fight? So it's a lot of like innovation of process, not just technology. But that's how we think about DIUx. It's the Pentagon's embassy to the commercial world.
Can you take us through the discussion, the pitch, whatever it was that got you on board for this, that pulled you out of all these other things that you do to work on this for a couple years?
Yeah, great question. I think when they first approached me, I was still at the company that had it, and I was, not really ready to go back into or go into government service as a civilian full time. And so, politely said, thanks, but no thanks. Or I'm sure you can find somebody better. I really credit an individual named Todd Park. Todd Park at the time was the CTO, Chief Technology Officer of the U.S. Worked at the White House, worked for President Obama. And he just had a way. I think he's like the most amazing and persuasive person I've ever met.
Wow.
And he came out to the Valley. He's built several multi-billion-dollar businesses and then served as CTO and was helping Secretary Carter try to do a reboot of DIU. And basically his pitch was, at this moment in time, you have an obligation to serve. Like there's nothing more important that you could be doing than this. And we will help you with the resources and the team support to actually be effective. And so he's very persuasive and convinced me and Chris and several others to say, we're going to put whatever else we were doing on pause and come in and try to make the measure of difference.
Wow. And this is a new entity within a giant bureaucracy. And I'm very interested in how you set a charter, a course, bring on the right people for anything within the government or military. What was the mission given to you as you start this out, and how do you take that and run with it?
So the mission Secretary Carter gave us was, how do you accelerate innovation and put it into the hands of warfighters? Right, that was our clarion call. I think I inherited
like how broad that is, right? I mean, like you could
super
do
broad.
So much. All right, sorry, keep going.
Super broad, very ill-defined. I think we inherited 9 individuals that were there, part of the original group. And over the course of those 2 years, built it up to about 100 folks. How do you go about it? We had this vision, and I think there's good and bad things about bureaucracies. The bad things is there's just so many layers, and things are slow. There are entrenched interests that will come after you, and we fought thousands of those battles. I could talk about a few, but we document a bunch of them. But on the other hand, bureaucracies all report up through a chain of command to one individual. And if that most senior person says jump, everyone jumps. And so I reported directly to Secretary Carter. He had told the world very publicly that this was a priority for him and that he wanted to get this done. And because of that, we were able to just move so quickly and get support, across the entire Department of Defense enterprise, that it was, amazing to do that, and I didn't always make a lot of friends along the way, but I'm proud to say that we did make a measure of difference at the end. But I give a lot of credit to Secretary Carter. I mean, I had a meeting once a week with his chief of staff, in which we would just outline all the blockages that we were having, and they would send a memo and things would get fixed. And it was pretty incredible to see how things could move. But I also had some great advice going into it. Both Todd and then the former chief of staff of the Air Force, Nordy Schwartz, were helping advise me and help me think through things. And Nordy gave me the advice that I should give him a term sheet. I should like list out the things that I want that we thought would be required for success. And that ranged from having control of our own budget, hire and fire authority, using G Suite and Google for our email instead of for our .mil email instead of having to use Kakabar. We need to collaborate quickly, and even one that said we could ask for any exception to policy for any regulation or rule, not law, of course, that we thought was impeding us. And all negative adjudications had to be sent to the secretary himself within 3 days or something like that. And so we sent this term sheet over to them. And I thought it'd be a nice way for me not to take the job because, they would say, no, thank you. We can't give you all these crazy things. Just say no. And I can honestly tell Todd that I did my best. I get a call that the secretary would like to see you. Can you be in DC next week? So I fly out there, spend an hour with him.
Are you worried going into this meeting, Raj? Like when you get this call and you're going over to DC, are you worried? Like, all right, he's going to tell me pound sand?
Yeah, well, I mean, clearly it wouldn't have been just that because I'm not flying out there. Yeah. But yeah, I didn't know exactly how it was going to go. He's a formidable man, but it was very, very supportive. And at the meeting, he's like, okay, when are you going to start? I'm like, okay. So then I go to the chief of staff. I'm like, hey, this is awesome. I'm very excited. But I need you to sign. And somebody needs to sign this term sheet that I sent over. And they're like, the secretary and the chief, they're like, we don't negotiate with future hires. I was like, I need somebody to tell me that you're serious. So the Pentagon lawyer spent like 3 weeks thinking about how they could do this. And ultimately, the chief of staff, he signed it. And so I had this note that I could walk around the Pentagon with.
Wow.
So that was the early days.
How did Todd Park find you? Did you all know each other? I mean, there's got to be 100 people that he could call on. How did he find you?
It's a good question. You're in the Valley now. It's a very small network. It's very reputationally based, and I think they were looking for someone that had been an entrepreneur or a financier in the Valley, but also had some military credibility. And so, I think the networks are small, and so somehow I got introduced to him.
That is amazing. You mentioned the vision, Raj, that you all had this vision that you pulled together. Just very tactically, how did you set that vision? Was it over a couple weeks? I mean, did it just kind of form on its own? Did you sit down with these 9 other folks and Christopher and just hammer something out in a couple hours?
I had a lot of friends that were in that unit already. There was 2 that, in particular, on the military side. One was a guy named Ernie Bio, who I'm actually in combat with. The other one is now Major General Steve Buteau. And so I had some insight into what was going on there. We had collectively talked about, okay, if we were going to build a new plan, how do we do it? One of the goals I wanted to do was to keep it in stealth mode for like 6 months, like let us go execute, build, and then we'll do a public view. That was not Secretary Carter's approach. There was he flew his 747 to Moffett, and there was a huge event announcing the launch of it. And so we had we had a vision built together. And as they say, all plans come to a change when you make contact with the enemy. So our original plan was we're going to build these deliberate processes. We're going to figure out the right startups, the right other investors and co-investors, and start building these things out and move at an orderly pace. 3 days into the job, we get a phone call from one of our friends on the Hill that basically says, "Hey, the DIU has been zeroized." I was like, I'm not sure what that means, but it doesn't sound good. It basically means Congress says you can get $0 in the next budget, which started 3 months, in 3 months the next fiscal year. And because it's zeroized, the Pentagon can't shift the money around internally. So it's a very pejorative thing. And so I'm like, boy, I just took this job. And now in 3 months, we're going to be out of a job. And so I spent those first 3 months fighting to get our budget restored and understanding why this was occurring. But then we had to go faster. Like all of a sudden I said, boy, we only have 3 months to prove that we can actually do this. And so our strategy shifted a week later of, okay, let's get companies on contract. Let's figure out what are the most near-term technologies that we can show and demonstrate to leadership in Congress that this vision that Carter had in '01, that commercial technology is going to matter, will actually be there, right? What are the right little drones? What are the right software things? And so that became a battle. Ultimately, as many things happen in DoD, there's small ball politics and individuals again that matter and change things. And what we discovered was one of the senior staffers in the House, they had requested a airlift, aviation support for a congressional delegation to travel somewhere. And for whatever reason, I guess Secretary Carter's staff had denied it. And so they're really upset about it. And because this was his baby, they said, we're going to hold you hostage. It's like, well, Secretary doesn't work for me. I work for him, right? What does, a Codell and aviation thing have anything to do with my mission here? But that's how things rolled. And so it took a really long time. I had to sort of go off-piste and rogue, if you will, and have a one-on-one meeting with the Haas chair, Honorable Mac Thornberry, which is kind of like meeting the Pope if you're in DoD land. But I had to do that kind of on my own, convinced him, he restored our budget, and we detail it. But it was a fast education on how things actually sometimes work in DC.
Jeez. So yeah, you mentioned, these are bureaucratic or Pentagon battles that you're fighting. And I was trying to think through who would be the opposing side. So that story you just described makes sense because it's like a personal, it's not necessarily they're defending an interest in something else. It's just tit for tat, I suppose. Who are some of the other battles you're fighting against to get this moving? Is it some of the larger defense contractors? Who is it that would want to slow this down?
It was surprisingly how many different approaches, but groups that found challenge with this. So there were folks that benefited from the status quo. Some of those could have been large defense contractors. There were, it wasn't like there was nobody doing anything innovative in the department, right? And so now you have these new shiny kids that showed up from Silicon Valley, and now we're doing innovation. So you have folks in the labs and other places saying, hey, we already do this. And then, but I think part of the real difference was because there had not been a lot of flow between places like Silicon Valley and the Pentagon, that there was just a mistrust of these two different systems, right? You have to remember when we took the job in 2014, that was just a year after the Snowden revelations. And so there was a lot of people in the Valley that said, boy, the government is just as bad as China and spying on me and taking data away from us. And on the there was these protests at Google and other places, and people in the Pentagon look, these are a bunch of hippies that don't care about national security. So there's a lot of mistrust, and just even mistrust in the system. Like if you don't have a set of requirements that are validated and gone through, and you go through all the process, maybe we'll end up with something that's wrong, right? If you didn't have this very robust process, an aircraft carrier might not work. You're going to keep it for 50 years. So the idea that you're going to contract for something and you don't even know exactly what it is, exactly how it's going to get built, because if you think about your iPhone, it's a great airplane, great piece of technology now. But the first iPhone was not near as good as what it is, and no one had the full vision of where it is today. And yet it would get updated every 6 weeks, but that's not how the military did procurement. So I think there was a lot of just mistrust that we had to overcome, and that takes time. So there were no shortage of antibodies that emerged.
So I want to get into some of the wins and some of the tech that comes out of this, but I suppose just before we do that, how were you trying to evaluate success for this organization, this entity that really had to prove itself? And you knew you'd be there a couple years, I would assume, but you probably wanted to live on. How would you have set up this for success? What were you trying to achieve before you left?
Well, I think there was a couple of different angles from tactical to strategic. Clearly on the tactical side, we just had to show that this organization could find, procure, and operationalize technology and partner with the services for that. So what are some actual attack that they got out there. I think the second existential thing is, of course, can we just survive and prove to both leadership in the Pentagon as well as on the Hill that this was a good use of taxpayer dollars to have this organization, right? And so to ensure that the longevity of the organization would survive after Secretary Carter was no longer the secretary, right? Because we knew that was coming election year. And I think the third piece was, are there structural reforms that went beyond DIU that other parts of the department would adopt? I viewed that our mission back then was not just delivering technology, but showing new processes and new methodologies. And I'm happy to talk about one in particular that has gone really, really well. But I think that sort of meta thing was important. In fact, I used to say at the time that if DIU really were successful at this job well, you would not need it. You could sunset it because the entire parent mother organization was being innovative. It's a large department, so it's probably not going to happen. But ideally, we would almost infect the department with this new way of thinking.
You'd have the processes in place that just carry on past. So why don't you talk to us? What is one of the processes that you put in place that you're just alluding to?
So when Chris and I were there, wandering on the hallways in the first few weeks, getting to know the team, one of the challenges that we had was, how do you actually contract with a startup at a speed that was relevant? At the time, most venture investors would tell startups not to work with the department because it would just take too long to get a contract, right? A fast procurement would be 18 to 24 months. A normal one, average was about 4 years at the time. And if you're in a startup, you have to raise money every 18, 24 months. And so you have to show wins within that time horizon. So there was just a fundamental mismatch. And so venture investors would tell their startup not to work with the government until later. In fact, my first company, my founding engineers were all NSA engineers. We knew what we were building would have been great for government, but our investors told us not to. And after my 10th meeting with some random general, we said, okay, we're not going to do this either because it's not going to bear fruit. And we sold the business. We had 0 cents of government revenue. So we were like, okay, we need to find a faster way to procure things. And there was a woman on our team. Her name was Lauren Daly. She was the daughter of a tank commander. So had some military background. And she was a civilian in the Army acquisition group and was detailed over to DIU. And on our first meeting, she said, I've taken some time to read the latest NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act, right? The annual budget bill.
Just not light reading.
Not light reading, right? Not a lot of people read that for fun. I don't know if people that write it sometimes read it. And she's like, hey, there is some new authority that Congress has given the department to supercharge how you do procurement. So there's this thing called OTA, Other Transaction Authority. It's been around a long time. NASA used it way back when. DARPA used it to a great extent. But there was a new authority that enabled the department to use it to do a competitive contract with a startup on a prototype basis. And then if they're successful, turn it into production, right? And help bridge this valley of death that people talk about from R&D to procurement. And we're like, wow, that's a really interesting idea. Like, can you do some research on this, Lauren? Tell us more about it. She's like, well, actually, I've written a 20-page paper on how to do it. And like, hands us this paper. And we're like, wow. And so then Chris takes it to the general counsel of the Pentagon, and they're like, well, yeah, that's right. This is the authority we have. They bless it. Lauren actually names it. She names it the Commercial Solutions Opening, CSO. And that's how we did all our contracts. And on average, our first contracts, I think, were like 2-3 months from meeting company to writing a contract. Fast forward now 10 years since Lauren found that and put it together, the Pentagon has put $70 billion of acquisition through that process.
No
right? That's
way.
not the DIU, of course. That's across the department. There's been $70 billion of OTAs and CSOs. So here's something that she, again, it goes back to that earlier conversation. an individual can matter, even in a massive bureaucracy, where one person with a creative idea, with the right amount of support and access, can really make a sea change. And so it's remarkable to see how that's expanded, and even large, weapons systems going through that.
That's amazing. Can you share, Raj, some of just a couple of the technologies that came out of this, whatever you're able to share as a result
Sure.
of DIU, like some of the groundbreaking ones that you're proud of?
Sure. There was a whole slew of them. I think we did my tenure, maybe 60 or 70 of them. But there were, we did a small drone. We supported a small drone company, Shield AI, which has now grown into a larger company, to use small drones to help special forces when they're breaching a house, where instead of sending a human in the front door, maybe you send a drone to see what's inside and prevent that first breacher or assaulter from getting hurt. We had worked with a company called Sail Drone, which was using these robot sailboats to do intelligence collection and narcotics trafficking, which was far more cost efficient than sending an airborne P3 with humans and burning a lot of gas. And then we did some really on software that I think I'm most proud of. One of them was helping the CAOC, the Combined Air Operations Center in Qatar, where we managed the Iraq and Afghanistan war, which I know you're well familiar with, modernize some of their software, right? And in particular, their like tanker planning tool, which I can go into a great story, but it's probably long. But essentially, it helped create the first software factory in the Air Force, which was called Kessel Run. And the guy from our team, Colonel Enrique Odi, ended up being the first commander of it. And so then that began to use, again, modern software development to say, shouldn't take 10 years to build a software platform, right? And we can just approach this very, very differently, where it's iterative, right?
Wow.
I think the Pentagon process deliberately moves the developer of a software as far away from the operator as possible. You have the operator, they have a bunch of problems or needs, they tell the requirements officer team, they build some requirements, then they send it over to the procurement people, who then run a acquisition program, and then you have the software developers at the actual company that then build that thing to match those requirements. And by the time it gets back out the snake, it's been 5 years, and whatever they needed is outdated, right? So we would send engineers to developers to sit right next to the operators, right, the guys in uniform, and say, what do you need? You want this feature? Try it. Okay, next day. And it was like this 24-hour cycle. And within weeks, we were able to help transform how tankers, air refueling tankers, were being scheduled and planned in combat.
I assume it was fairly manual prior to that, or cumbersome.
It was whiteboards and magnetic pucks.
Come on.
One guy on a computer doing some Excel math. Then they would plug that into the other one, right? So if you think about it, we have, I don't know how many air refuelings a day back then, but it was 60 man hours to build a plan for the ATO, the tasking and the daily tasking order. 60 man hours, and then they would figure out a plan of these tankers be at this location, and these fighters will pick it up, and then you send it out to the squadrons for execution that next day. With this new system, it was just like a traveling salesman problem. The computer would come up with a solution in like 30 seconds, and they'd spend an hour to do quality control and make sure it's right, and then they could blast it out. And it was all computerized. The real advantage of it was, back in the day, there was a lot of troops in contact situations, right? Bad guys shooting at good guys, and we need to emergency help save them. You'll send the fighters to go rush over there or help them. Well, the fighters then need gas, so now we need to send tankers, but you can't reflow the plan because it took so long to build. So they had tankers parked all over at bases in the region that would then scramble, emergency, go over here, get these guys gas. So they would do that. Well, what they discovered was, because now the system could just be you could redo it. They would just reflow the plan, and it would have, you wouldn't need to scramble so much. And what we discovered was each scramble of a tanker cost about $250,000, not including wear and tear on the airplane. And so we've had 2 or 3 less of those per day. Basically, the tool, which I don't know, I think we probably spent $2 million on, paid for itself in a week, right? And just saving gas, time, people. And so, and again, this is like tanker planning. It's not rocket science necessarily, but it just shows, again, a modern approach to software can make a real change. And so then they went and started going after every single one of these other type of technology applications. And I think, if I fast forward now 10 years and move away from the tactical to the strategic, the Congress is, I think in this next budget, will be passing a law that removes something called the color of money for software. So the government has different flavors of money to buy things. You have R&D, research something. You have procurement, go and buy it. Then you have operations. I want to use it. Sustainment dollars. I need to fix something. All of those things make sense if you have an aircraft carrier. It completely falls apart when you have software. You don't sustain software. It is, if you build and then sustain, you're by definition doing it wrong. It's an iterative, constant process. And we're just all used to our phones auto updating, every day with new versions. And so I think Congress finally is seeing that, and will get rid of colors of money for software. So it doesn't matter if it's a procurement dollar or it doesn't matter. It's, we need to continue to fund and support this thing. So I think it's a sea change for how they think about building things. And so I'm very glad that it wasn't just us, it wasn't DIU, but this type of change is coming about.
That's great. You mentioned earlier something about the cost trade-off that's happening, and you describe an Abrams tank going against small drones that are probably very cost efficient. How do you think about cost and these trade-offs that have to be made for technology in the future of warfare?
I think we're coming to a point, in my personal opinion, where cost is a strategic advantage in and of itself. Right? We think about maneuver speed, mass, all the sort of tenets of military power. I think cost in and of itself is different, right? And if we have a swarm of drones, and they're so cheap, so they're not perfect, right? Because if you really want to make them perfect, they cost more. Well, 10% of them crash on takeoff. Maybe you don't care anymore because you're launching 10,000 of them and you lose 10,000, you lose 1,000 of them along the way. You're still going to overwhelm the adversary. And so this cost drives us to a new way of thinking about autonomy, type of drones. How does the software make them more powerful? And publicly, I saw news reports about the recent Iranian attack on Israel, where we sent some F-15s to shoot down these Shahed drones. I think they said they shot them down with AMRAAM missiles. I think an AMRAAM is $2 to $3 million a pop. Those Shahed drones cost $15,000 a pop. Well, that sort of equation doesn't scale well, right? And I think you're seeing that with the Abrams tanks. So we need just a fundamentally different way of thinking about how we buy these things.
It's interesting. Actually, we had an F-15 pilot on the show a year ago who shot down one of those drones several years back. But you're right, the cost trade-off there is significant. So I'll get you out of here soon, Raj. Just I'm curious, what do you have any books that you recommend for people that have influenced you and how you make some of these decisions? I mean, you're very successful both in the cockpit and in business. You've been brought into many discussions with high-level folks. What are some of the books that you end up recommending for folks?
A very interesting question. So I think there's a few. So I think understanding how the Pentagon and the Congress works. There's a great book by Chris Brose called The Kill Chain. He's now at Anduril, but was the staff director of the Senate. I think that's a wonderful book. I think if you think about the startup world, if you want to go be an entrepreneur, I like Ben Horowitz's "The Hard Thing About Hard Things," which is I think a great read on what it's like to be in the in the arena in the startup. As I see that sign behind you, and then I don't know. I guess just more on like individualism. I'm a fan of Ayn Rand's works, from Atlas Shrugged to The Fountainhead of individuals and individual motivation.
That's awesome. And then for this book, for Unit X, why did you and Chris decide to write this?
There's a couple of reasons. One, I think, these are some stories that needed to be told. 10 years out, there were some great heroes that did amazing things in the early days, Lauren, Enrique, Ernie, and I think their stories needed to be told. But again, I think we're in this moment of time where Ukraine war, the Hamas attacks are showing the world how rapid changes of technologies are changing things. Plus, what you're seeing here in the Valley is a totally different view on defense. Every major firm, in fact, my own firm, Shield, is focused on national security, and so you're seeing a lot of capital flow into it. And so we thought we had some views on where the future of this technology is going, and we think it's really, really important to get it right. Because in my belief, the greatest challenge of our generation will be the preservation of democracy over autocracy. And we're seeing a lot of military adventurism by people that don't mean well, and it's really important to get this right.
That's very interesting. Well, I really appreciate the time, Raj. There's two questions I ask everybody before I let you out of here. And one is, when you were flying, or when you still fly, and you're downrange, is there anything that you carry with you in your flight bag, in your flight suit, in your kit that has sentimental value, good luck charm, something that somebody gave you?
Yeah, of course. I think I have a picture of my family that was given to me, and that's still somewhere in my knee board. I didn't.
Yep, I did the same. Right, right on the knee board. Had it at the back of all the papers that I would check out now and again. And then the last question, just I know you're still serving, so your fight isn't over yet. But just looking back on the time that you spent, time away from family, near-death experiences, the close calls, as you look back on your flying career, would you do it again?
Oh, absolutely. And if they'd let me start over, I would. But I think I'm too old to go back as a young lieutenant.
Oh, geez. Well, I know you're busy. I'm so grateful for the time, Raj. Is there any place you'd point people for you on socials, on the book? We'll have everything in the description, but anything you'd like to add?
No, I mean, I think there's lots of great organizations supporting veterans, and a lot of them go on LinkedIn. But I'm just glad people have interest in this, and I think it's super important, and people should get personally involved.
Excellent. Thanks so much for the time, Raj. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Ryan.
I hope you enjoyed that combat story. Now, Raj is a very interesting character, very accomplished, as you can tell. Swims with some of the big fish, as you can imagine. And accomplished not just in the cockpit, but in his life as an entrepreneur. And being asked to stand up DIUx is no small ask, as you can tell. So I was really grateful that we had time with Raj. Unfortunately, it was very short, so hope you still got something out of that. I found it very interesting, and I think the book will be fascinating. That is just out now, which is great to hear. So a couple listener comments. The first is from Boy Daz, who is a subscriber on YouTube, which I greatly appreciate, and talking about the Dan Pace interview, where he talks about surviving the surge in Iraq as an infantryman and then special forces officer. He says it was awesome serving with Pace, the Hawk. And I don't know if the Hawk is a reference to Dan, if that was a nickname of his, and I'm wishing that I had gotten this before the interview so I could have asked him about it. So if there's more context there, Boy Daz, please let us know, because I would love to hear it. And then also from DGUTI says, Dan is an awesome dude and a solid commander. Glad you had him on. And that is also great to hear, that we got people listening who served with a guy like Dan and could speak to what he's done. And then we also had a great Apple 5-star review, and it's from GBMBC, and he says, "Just when I think I've heard the best, I listen to another episode." So it's so great to hear these comments that keep us going, and they get this into more people's hands. So I'm so grateful for that. With that, wherever you're at in the world, weekend or weekday, hope you have a good rest of your day. And as always, stay safe, y'all.